Good evening and welcome to Inside Government, show brought to you for the fall 2025 semester here at Cayuga Community College. That's shown on Spectrum, Verizon, Fios, the Auburn Regional Media Access, better known as ARMA, as well as Win 89, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. We are delighted to have in the studio New York State Assembly Minority Leader Will Barclay back in the studio to give us an Albany update. A Republican, he was first elected to the Assembly in 2002 and elected as Minority Leader of the Lower House in 2020. He was reelected last November, representing parts of Cayuga, Oswego counties in the State Assembly. And we've got lots to talk about, some of it developing as we sat down today and yesterday, but we plan to talk about the New York State budget, what has passed and what is coming up this coming year. We're going to talk about the government shutdown and how that and the big beautiful bill may impact New York and its programs. And there's some local laws that are taking effect, some dealing with energy, some with local prisons. We're going to cover all that and maybe even a little bit of politics. Welcome back.
Terrific. Thanks for having me, guys.
So always a delight to have you here. You're always willing to give your time, and we appreciate it. We know you're a very big supporter of our campus up in Fulton, and for this campus as well. So thank you.
Thank you. You've talked about how long I've been in the Assembly. It's making me feel a little old. But
listen, I've been doing this show just as long. So that's... So it is about 3:15 on Thursday. The government shutdown has been in effect for about a little over 39 hours. I'm assuming, unless something occurred while I was with the last guest, it's still on.
As far as I know.
So how does that impact New York State at this in the early stages?
Well, I don't think much in the early stages. I mean, it depends on how long it drags on. We'll see. I was on the call 2 nights ago with Speaker Johnson. They were trying to kind of put their message out to, I guess, Republicans throughout the country. And that specific question came up, how is this going to affect our individual states? And even they weren't sure at this time. My understanding of shutdown, there's a lot of different funding that goes on in the federal government. There's entitlements that don't get touched by this. There's essential
You're still going to have air traffic controllers, you're going to still have TSA.
Right, essential
they may
workforce.
be disgruntled
exactly
because of their pay situation,
right.
But they still need to work.
Right, it's really discretionary funding that will get frozen, so we'll see how that seeps down to the state. But right now, I don't think there's a real concern, but if it drags on, obviously it's going to
So I think that's
everything.
the worry right now, because unlike the past where it's gone a couple of days or maybe a week or two, doesn't look like anybody's moving here at all. So what's the long-term concern? We just had the Office for the Aging. Their Medicare hotlines that'll open up on
right.
October 15th. They're worried that those sites won't be up.
Right.
That will clearly impact seniors that way. What about the state and what you're doing?
I guess I wonder, it doesn't have any direct effect on us, again, right now, what I'm doing in my office, but I do wonder what the end game is. I think that's a very legitimate question. I mean, they seem not even close. In my mind, the Republicans are willing just to put up a straight continuing resolution to keep government open. That's something the Democrats have agreed to many, many times in the past. In fact, here in New York State in the past, I think with Kathy Hochul over the last couple of years, we've done something like 17 continuing resolutions. And it just essentially doesn't put policy in there.
Right.
It just keeps government running on the same policy basis and funding basis that it has, so people can continue to negotiate.
So let's deviate on that on two. Let's talk about the state of New York first.
Okay.
When you all have to do a continuing resolution, whether there's a gap or not, services do not get shut down like they seem to be getting shut down right now. Am I correct?
Right.
New York handles it differently.
Well, the difference is federal government shut down. They didn't do a continuing resolution. In New York,
but
we've always...
if you had a gap, though, of a couple of days, you would not...
Never had that experience. We've always done a continuing resolution. In fact, in New York, it is a little interesting because it does give the governor a lot of power, because the governor can decide what she wants to fund or not during that. And
which is a whole different issue.
Different issue completely. So the feds, though, they didn't come to an agreement on a continuing resolution. My understanding is, the Democrats want a lot of policy changes put into whatever continuing resolution they want to do, where the Republicans are just offering.
Well, the one thing that seems to be is this issue of the health insurance premiums, and I think it's 22 million Americans. Do we know how many New Yorkers that?
I have a number. So I don't have any.
So it's about a premium increase in that issue. That seems to be the bigger holding.
Well, issue. I'm not even sure that's the case. I think some of the stuff that was negotiated out during It was called the Big Beautiful Bill. Now they have it as a taxpayer savings bill or something like that. But there's
it's all about branding, buddy.
It is. It is. I don't know if Big Beautiful Bill did it, but taxpayer
well, clearly,
savings is a much better.
Yeah. Well, Big Beautiful Bill clearly did not do it. If they're changing it.
But in any event, I think there are some policy changes that probably haven't gone into effect. Like some Medicaid eligibility type requirements that don't go into effect until the future. I don't know. I think that's some of the stuff that the Democrats are trying to renegotiate just in a continuing resolution. I know, for instance, PBS funding was something like $500 million. I know the Democrats want to put that in this continuing resolution. So there's a number.
Yeah.
Again, give me a little credit, guy. I'm not an expert on this. I'm really more of a state level, but this is what.
But you're paying attention.
100%. Yeah,
okay.
Very much so.
So to talk about, you have one of the larger systems in New York State is WCNY. We're not part of WCNY, but it covers Cayuga County. Do you see the states having to come in at that point? Do you think you're going to get requests from places like WCNY and Binghamton and Watertown? I'm looking at. You get a lot of requests.
Possibly. I mean, we get requests from every entity out there, and if they're suffering from
we just talked about a member item to change the music for this
year.
Well,
we'll see how the interview goes. We're happy to consider it.
So you, at this stage, you said a few minutes ago, you don't know how this ends.
Right.
But do you see it go long?
The longest I think they did was under Newt Gingrich, was that back in the 90s, and that was 36 days. Interestingly enough, I did read this today when I was reading on that. It never really has any political consequence, and it seems so acute when it's happening.
Right.
But the last time they did it, the Republicans picked up, and the Republicans were the ones that were responsible for the shutdown, unlike the Democrats this time. The Republicans then picking up the Senate and the House, or held the House and picked up the Senate. So I think if it goes on for months, there probably will be some political consequences, but if it's just a short-term thing, in the past it has not proved that way. Yeah, it's a blip and people move on. But, ultimately I think whatever brings any side together, state, local, federal politicians, they got to feel the heat.
The pinch.
And I don't know if they're feeling it yet and how long it will take to get to feel that pinch.
We're going to kind of weave in and out here. I don't want to talk all about legislation all at once, but I want to pick one at a time. One of the items that you have paid a lot of attention to is what's going on with energy in New York State. So we have, for example, there's on January 1st, there's going to be a fossil fuel equipment in certain new construction goes into effect. It won't allow installing equipment that burns fossil fuels in buildings, with some exceptions, 7 stories or lower.
Right.
What's that all about?
Well, I think it's problematic. First of all, it's really a push by particularly the more leftist Democrats. They call themselves environmentalists. They don't believe in any fossil fuels. If they had their way, they would outlaw fossil fuels immediately. They think that they're, whether they are or how much the extent they think that's contributing to climate change. So whether it's, putting any kind of, fire burning furnace or fuel burning furnace, gas burning stoves they want to get rid of. They're trying to stop all that. But the thought is ultimately it'll stop us emitting CO2 and help prevent, save the climate.
But I'm just looking at buildings in a general. How is that going to impact construction? Because
you
have Micron just around the corner from you.
Cause prices to skyrocket. I mean, already it's hard to do any business in New York, building particularly, because of all the rules and regulations, just adding to this cost. But we're seeing it ultimately through everything. I mean, everybody's seeing their utility bills go up, and it's not just because Nigger Mohawk has to upgrade their infrastructure. That's part of it, but they have to upgrade it because they're trying to get the renewable energies from upstate and try to ship it downstate, and that's expensive to do it. So you're seeing increase in cost due to all these green mandates. So
there's an exceptions for construction of 100,000 square feet and certain like that.
Yeah.
But you do
housing now. There's no exception.
Right. So that's where I'm going. So we're talking with Micron a lot about the lack of housing.
Yep.
It seems counterintuitive, or maybe just doesn't make sense to me. How can you do one and have these regulations where at the same time you say we got to build a lot more housing if we're going to get thousands of new people into central New York?
I would even be sympathetic with their claim that somehow we had to put these rules in place because we have to worry about climate change and global warming and CO2 emissions. However, New York only emits all toll, and it's, buildings are just part of the process. Obviously, you have fire, fuel generated electricity, you have transportation, all these other things that also emit. But even with all that, it's only like 0.4% of all the global emissions. So you kind of question, what's the cost benefit of all these policies that we're putting in place? And I would submit, Guy, that the cost of this way exceeds any of the benefit we're getting from it. So some of this, I think, it's just political rhetoric and sounds good, and it's particularly those, I hate to pick on my colleagues from New York City, but it's particularly those that don't really always have a great understanding, one, how food's produced, how energy, electricity is generated, and they kind of sit in their world and think all this stuff just kind of shows up, or we can just put up a couple of windmills and we'll have enough electricity, et cetera. That's just simply not.
I'll get to
how
the windmills
it
in
works,
a second.
I'm happy to talk about
so,
them.
not that I want you to fence windmills.
Yeah.
Going back on this issue of energy creation, are those individuals who are supportive, this is part of this Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act of 2019.
CLCPA.
Good, okay. So with that, are they going to be the same people who are going to oppose the expansion? I know you would like to have another nuclear plant located in Oswego.
Right. So that's another great question. Some do and some don't. I think some of the more so-called hardcore type environmentalists want no nuclear, no fossil fuels. They think we can do it all on wind and solar, but that's simply not the case. However, for the instance, the governor, who I assume supports the LCPA, she is, to her credit, has said she's supportive of nuclear, and she's putting it down to the New York Power Authority to take bids and figure out how to build another nuclear plant in New York State. So I'm completely supportive of that. Yeah.
So is the electric bus issue part of this 2019 legislation as well, where districts are being mandated?
That's just a separate piece
so
of
where is that?
legislation.
Because you have a lot of school districts. You have a really interesting district,
right,
the way you're gerrymandered that way.
Right.
You have a lot of school districts. Where are districts on this whole issue of the mandate for electric buses?
I think they're concerned about it. One, they're concerned just out of a cost basis, but they're also concerned about reliability and whether this is actually doable. So we did put more money, or I should say the majorities put more money into the program to provide subsidies for schools to do electric buses, but they can put a lot in. The question is, do those electric buses have the range, particularly in the winter, to be able to do the services that they're required to do, such as picking up students and getting them safely to schools? So we have a problem with it. I always said on especially electric buses for school districts, I forget what the amount is now we're spending on the state, but why don't we just do a pilot program? Pick 3 districts, completely fund them.
Or have districts seek to
or whatever, join
participate.
it and completely fund them and see how it works. And then if it works, you can start rolling it out and help other districts, whether it's through just regular
So sometimes
subsidies.
it's just an all or nothing.
Yeah, and they're doing it, everybody demanding a mandate that you have to do this.
So we're all for local control until it bumps up into our control of those localities.
Right.
So as you know, in your district, and in I think every upstate district, there is groups, local groups and local governments, I want to make it clear, not just groups, but governments who may not be happy about solar farms or wind farms that are popping up. And where is the state in this? Not necessarily your conference, but it almost sounds, what I've been reading from the newspaper, as Will Rogers says, that's all I know, it sounds like these communities may not be for them. They're like their town boards and village boards, but they're being overruled by the state.
Yeah, so you used to have local buy-in to these things. I mean, I can't remember, 2 or 3 years ago, we passed legislation, not myself, but Albany passed legislation that allows, they put up a board, set up a board that can overrule local control on these types of projects, all in the name of, clean energy. And
so in your district, are you getting a lot of feedback from localities about solar and wind?
I have. Those solars go in tranches, so we're on a low tranche, but they'll put about RFPs out to build more solar, and all of a sudden we're going to see a lot more coming up. So right now it's kind of quiet, but when those developers come and say they want to put it on property, all of a sudden I hear a lot. Wind, fortunately, in my district, I haven't heard too much about. It's been more up north and a little bit more to the west, but I assume those are all going to come up. But I do think that's troublesome for local control. Interestingly, you try to cite something that's down off Long Island and try to cite it in Westchester or the suburbs. People people that normally support green energy go crazy. What they envision, we take the aesthetic hit or whatever for putting these solar wind farms up and get very little benefit, and they say, well, we feel good about ourselves because we're getting green energy. But it never is in their backyard.
Right.
It's always,
NIMBY.
Our backyard, yeah,
yeah.
I know, right.
So one of the things that is in your backyard is on September 4th, federal ICE agents raided a facility in Cato, which is in your district.
Yeah.
Have you been briefed by law enforcement or the federal government or the state about what happened?
No, I haven't asked for a briefing. I do have contacts within law enforcement, so I haven't officially been briefed about them, but I have talked to law enforcement.
So what do you know,
what happened.
what led to this?
Well, I've heard, I don't even want to disclose it because I don't know if that's public.
Okay.
They are remaining silent. There was criminal activity that there was concern. I don't know if that's what tipped them off and why they went into nutrition bar, but that was, it's a little bit more than what's being reported. They haven't said exactly.
Yeah, so
it wasn't just because illegal migrants were working at the facility. There was also some criminal activity.
Yeah, so the first allegation, and two have
But don't
now,
quote me on that, by the way.
but I believe in the
haven't been
papers
briefed on
today,
that. Yeah.
2 people have been charged now with
Okay.
crimes, so
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah.
So I think originally some of this goes to what role the Cayuga County Sheriff's played in this, and the sheriff will be here
Right.
next Thursday sitting
Right.
there. It seems like, according to Channel 9, which I know you appear on Newsmakers occasionally, I watch you there, the allegation was they were looking for violent criminals, and I guess Channel 9 is saying, well, there was no evidence to that effect.
Right.
Do you know if there were violent?
That's not the crime I understand
Okay.
what it is, but there could be. I'm just not aware of that.
Have you talked to the Meal people?
No,
Okay.
no, I haven't talked to them at all. So, anyways, it is, I think, a tough situation with these, migrants and illegals that are here in the country. I mean, clearly, there's 3 things. The Democrats appear just under Biden, open the border and allow anyone who's here illegally to stay. There's some people that I think believe we should shut the border, secure the border, which I happen to believe in, but maybe have some amnesty for some that are being here. And then, at this election, Trump certainly ran on the issue of deporting illegal migrants here, particularly starting with those who have committed felonies or crimes, and then maybe work your way into other things. So I guess it's just a question of where people fall on that. There does seem, I'm not going to criticize because I don't know all the facts. I do know, for instance, up in Jefferson County when they had that raid on the farm, there were some really serious allegations of child abuse there, and they had to separate the migrants from the children, but that never seemed to get reported. It seemed like it was some sort of egregious separation of families. So my point is there always seems to be sort of two sides of these stories, and we often hear the sort of the egregious part of it first and not realize maybe some of the facts are on the ground. I don't know if that's the case at Nutrition Bar. I just hope as Americans, of course, that we want to do stuff with a sense of compassion and not do something just, mean-spirited or whatever for political reasons. That hasn't been the case. I don't know, all that. But
So I know obviously there's some conversations here in your district in Cayuga County. I also read the Palladium Times, and I know there's been a lot of negative feedback up there about some involvement by law enforcement there.
Yeah.
So you've got some groups out there, and there is a proposal in the Cayuga County legislature, I don't know if you're aware of, to not cooperate with federal ICE agents in certain cases. What do you tell those localities if they ask for your advice? And by the way, have they?
Yeah, no one's asked me. I've been pretty strong about being opposed to sanctuary-type policies that we have, particularly in New York City, but also around the state. I think it's very important that all law enforcement at every level of government cooperate with each other. Otherwise, I think that places, ICE agents can be placed in danger. Our own local law enforcement can be placed in danger. So that communications has to be there, and I feel very strongly. We've seen a lot of policies in the state over the last decade trying to isolate New York from the rest of the country or federal law enforcement and not cooperating. I just think that's the wrong step forward. If you don't like policies that are being implemented by the federal government, vote against it and advocate it, but you can't just kind of go off on your island and say we're going to do our own thing. Because ultimately, especially with law enforcement, it just puts everybody in danger.
So it kind of goes to political climate. I don't want to get a whole lot into this, but you have followed politics for a long time. Your dad was in the state Senate. That's how I first met him.
Yep.
Doug Barclay was in the state Senate, most likely a different Republican than today's Republican there. But how have you, it seems that you've seen a lot. So I don't know how old you are, but let's say in the last 40 years you've seen change from both serving in the assembly for the last 20 plus years, plus what your dad saw. Has that ever been this toxic?
Well, I can't speak to how toxic it was when Dad was there, and I take a little exception. He might have been a different Republican than what Republicans are now. Every party evolves somewhat. I would say Democrats are probably different.
But he was a more in
yeah,
Albany. He was a more moderate Republican.
In some ways, that's probably could be true, but he certainly was conservative.
On some things.
In the past, yeah,
and always around you.
Yeah, right. So it's hard for me to speak. I do think sides become more far apart, and maybe that's led to some of the toxicity that you're seeing.
But do you worry about violence and the rhetoric?
Well, I definitely worry about that. In fact, that is something new that I had never thought or even occurred to me, particularly in my position, of any danger of constituencies coming after me physically. A couple of times in Albany, you might run up against protesters that might
show up in the gallery
in your face a little bit, but I never worried about my
but you look
physical.
at what happened with Charlie Kirk. You
Well,
look at the leader, state legislators in Minnesota, the firebombing at the governor's mansion in Philadelphia, and clearly what happened to Donald Trump as a candidate and a former president last summer. Do you and your conference worry about your safety now?
And it's on both sides. So that's both. We've had several briefings with the governor's office. We've had briefing with law enforcement. So I do think it's important. I think you'd be naive, or maybe not naive, but stupid not to be concerned and just watch your back a little bit more than maybe you had to in the past.
Budget passed. Quick 2 or 3 quick questions on the budget that was passed in the spring. We're far past that. We'll move on. It's not about what you did for me yesterday.
Go ahead.
Did your conference support most of the bills?
No, we were primarily against the bills because, again, this budget I think spent something like over $250 billion. It didn't cut taxes. It added some expenses.
Is there anything in the bill you like? The bill?
Oh, I'm
there's
sure.
several pieces.
There's always things we like in the budget that I could agree with. You're asking me now. It's 8 months off of that,
right,
so I can't. But let me say this: we don't think we can continue on the trajectory of tax and spend we've done in New York State for the last decade or 15 years. And so something's going to have to change. And it's going to take some real political capital for any leader to put their necks out there and say, we just can't continue this on. We've lost millions of people in New York, and they're not leaving because of the weather. They're leaving because there are better opportunities and the cost of living in other states is cheaper.
Today. We're running air conditioning in October here. So that leads to the budget that's going to be about 5 months from now. The governor will propose it. By the way, it's an election year next year. I don't know if anybody's told you.
No, is that right?
So do you see that you're going to get from her an election year budget that's going to look to please specific constituencies when it comes to money versus dealing with what you just suggested?
Right. Well, first of all, it will really depend on revenue. So far, the revenue for the state, for the personal income tax, which we get most of our money from, has been fairly good. So I think.
Are you surprised at the markets?
I'm
Rally
not a financial guy, but I'm
but
pleasantly
you sit on
surprised.
boards, so you know that the numbers are up.
Yeah, they've been good. So that translates very well. We get something like, I forgot, 30% of our revenue directly from Wall Street. So those numbers are good. Usually means the state budget's good. So that's the first thing. We got to see, in New York State, we have to balance our budget. We can't borrow like they can on the federal level. So what she does to be able to spend politically is a question of what she has to spend.
So let me give you 2 examples.
I don't think we're going to see tax breaks. I'd be surprised.
Okay.
And I do think there's going to have to be an effort to fill what she sees. I don't know how much is going to happen this next year's budget, but the out years with the federal changes in policy that may lead to less spending from the money given to us from the federal.
Talking about the big beautiful bill.
Yep.
Okay, so we know that there's likely more cuts in the education area. So that means less money to Albany. Albany has never, to the best of my knowledge, at least in the last 3 decades, cut education spending. Am I right on that?
Yeah,
it's
always
it usually goes up.
Under this governor, it's really exploded.
So at some point you got to fill that. So if you lost X number of dollars, you got to fill that X with state money.
Right.
Well, something else has got to go.
Right.
What goes?
Isn't that always a matter of priorities, though, on the states? So let me just talk about, first of all, education, isn't funded that great by the federal government.
But there is going to be some type of hit.
Maybe even less. So I don't know if they cut all that funding.
Right.
They said they're going to do away with the Department of Education, but I don't know if that means they're not going to fund that. That seems a little unclear. Healthcare is probably a better illustration of what you're trying to point. Well, the numbers may be bigger. We'll see how this continuing resolution, the budget goes on in Albany or in Washington. But essentially what they did was they tightened the eligibility requirements for people on Medicaid. So as a result, less people probably will be on Medicaid. As a result, those are the big revenue sources for hospitals and nursing homes. So as a result, they're probably going to see less of a bit. So the question is how much the state is going to try to make up that amount. That's
so
really
let me give you an example.
And if we should, by the way, is that something we ought to do from a policy standpoint?
So let me give you one as a policy, because I think you're interested in this particular subject, and we caught you off guard in the sense that there's a story in the Citizen today, online in the last hour and a half, which is there's a $187 million cut from the big, beautiful bill to Homeland Security. That translates into about $120,000 for the Sheriff's Department. A, are we going to see more of that? And B, does that mean the state needs to come in and make up that 187, which means you got to take from someplace, unless the other alternative is you've got a printing press to print money or you raise taxes?
Right. So the devil's in the details. So some of this money, I don't know specifically on this, but I have seen a lot of federal money out there that was really residual from COVID era money. A lot of it just hadn't been spent. I don't have any idea if this is the case. So the federal government looked at it and said, well, why we have this money out here? Let's either cut it or bring it back to the feds. Whether that's the case here, you have to ask. This is the first I know about that. I know the governor put out a number of, hair on fire type releases saying, Donald Trump is trying to cut law enforcement in this. So I'm always skeptical when the rhetoric's that high,
Did she take the time to meet with you in your conference?
So a lot more than Governor Cuomo did. So I will give her.
I'm not surprised.
I didn't have much of a relationship with Governor Cuomo. At least with this governor, I do talk to her. I wouldn't say on a regular basis, but And
they're open to update you on.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, so there is some communication, and so I do appreciate that. Much better than maybe it has been in the past.
I've got about 4 more sections, but I got about 2 minutes. So you don't mind we get into politics a little bit?
I hope we would.
So we're a couple weeks into, a couple months into before petitions and nominations in some races. Do you have a favorite for governor right now? Or have you endorsed anybody?
I haven't endorsed anybody. I think it's too early because we don't have any announced candidates. But as we discussed, you got Bruce Blakeman, who's the county executive in Nassau County, who's up for election locally in November. So he's sort of, I think, been muted just because he has to concentrate on winning that. And then we have Congresswoman Elise Stefanik from
Do you
the
think
North
she's
Country.
in?
I hope so. I mean, I think she's an A candidate. I think Bruce Blakeman's an A candidate. So I'd be happy with either of them, but we hope either one of those are going to be in. So those are the two we're talking about it. And I think either one. Hochul, I think one thing that's good for the Republican side on a political sense is Hochul's numbers are in the tank. And so I do think probably more than ever we have a chance to win the governorship.
Going back to like 1994 with Mario Cuomo and George Pataki. Closer to home and more importantly to your conference, you have a member of your conference, John Lamondis, who's going to be here in a couple of weeks. He wants to unseat freshman Congressman John Mannion. Are you supporting him, or is that too early as well?
No, I'm supporting John.
Okay.
I mean, he's out of our conference. I know what a sincere, hardworking guy he is. He's got a great background. I think he would serve Central New York tremendously in Congress. So unless someone... Right now, he's the only candidate, as far as I know, running, and I think he would make a great congressman, too. So.
And on the idea of the congressional seats, there's a lot of talk about, we see what the tit for tat in Texas and California. Do you think that mid-decade redistricting comes to New York?
Well, it can't.
No, I know.
The problem
but do you think
legally,
there'll be efforts to try to override?
There probably will be. We'll see how it proceeds in other states, but you would have to get two successive sessions to get it done.
And that's not on time
by that time it's passed. So I think it's going to be very difficult, even if the Democrats wanted to do something on that.
You planning to seek re-election?
I am.
Okay. Do you read, listen to books?
I do.
What are you reading right now?
The history of money, interesting. It's really about crypto and how good crypto is, but yeah.
Because you're on a banking board, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
so is it because of that, or just
I've never,
what that will do in New York?
That's no, I never had a good feel about Bitcoin and crypto money, so I just wanted to learn how to
because you don't trust it, or you don't understand it? Because I don't understand it.
I didn't understand it. Actually, this book is very pro-Bitcoin, just Bitcoin, not the other cryptocurrencies. So I find that really interesting.
I run a foundation. That's my real job, and we have this discussion: should we be in Bitcoin and all that? And it's so confusing and so technical. I don't know that our minds are on that.
It's very hard. I can't say I could give you advice. Buy gold. bury it, I guess. That's the best you can
History
do.
old thing, okay. So our guest has been the Assembly Minority Leader, Will Barclay. We do appreciate you always making the time to come down here. Hope you'll come down for another update when you get a chance. And thank you for your time here.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
I don't know if we're going to get a member item about the sound, but we'll talk about that afterwards. We'll be back on Tuesday with Auburn Large School District Superintendent Misty Slavic, who'll give us a district update. There's obviously a lot going on there, as well as the new director of the YMCA, Scott Sinsabo, will be here. Next Thursday, Cayuga County Sheriff Brian Skank will be here, as we mentioned. And we're also going to have a health discussion. Cassandra Archer, the doctor who's with the Cayuga County Health Department, is going to talk to us about the flu and COVID, and we're seeing upticks already, so we're going to get her thoughts on vaccinations and where everything is on the health front. On Thursday the 16th, we will have hopefully the candidates for the 10th legislative district, and a special election is occurring there. But we do know that we have all 4 candidates coming in on Thursday, October 23rd for the Auburn City Council, and those questions will be asked by Robert Harding, and I will do the moderating. If you'd like to let us know if you have some guests that you would like us to bring on or some questions for anything other than the candidates, please let me know at cozguytho@aol.com. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cayuga Community College. We want to thank you for watching. Be safe, and we'll see you back here in the studio on Tuesday.